I never imagined the worst night of my life would unfold in a five-star restaurant with crystal chandeliers hanging overhead like guillotines. The ambiance screamed wealth, polished marble floors, waiters in pristine white gloves, and soft violin music that felt more like a funeral march than dinner titan. Lawrence's mother sat across from me, her posture so perfect it could have been sculpted, and her eyes assessed me like I was a stain on her expensive tablecloth. "So, Parker," she began, swirling her wine glass with practiced elegance, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Tell me about yourself. What exactly do you do for a living?" My hands instinctively flattened against my jeans under the table, those same jeans I'd agonized over wearing tonight, knowing they'd be out of place. I glanced at Lawrence, sitting beside me, hoping for some sign of support, but he was laser-focused on his lamb chops, jaw clenched tight like he was solving a complex equation. No backup, no defense. Nothing. "I'm a graphic designer," I managed, forcing confidence into my voice even though it sounded hollow to my own ears. "Oh, how modern," she replied with a laugh that could freeze oceans. "Freelance work, I presume? So you work from home?" The way she emphasized "from home" made it sound like an insult, like I was some lazy dropout spending my days in pajamas watching reality TV. My throat constricted. I wouldn't cry here. I wouldn't give her that satisfaction. "Parker works with several major brands," Lawrence interjected suddenly, but his tone was mechanical, rehearsed, like he was reading from a corporate memo rather than defending someone he cared about. That hurt worse than his silence. The first course arrived, some tiny portion of food arranged artistically that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. Lawrence's mother continued her interrogation disguised as polite conversation. "And where did you study, dear? Which university?" "State University," I answered, knowing exactly where this was headed. "Ah," she nodded slowly, her expression carefully neutral but her meaning crystal clear. "Not Ivy League then. Still, I'm sure you received an adequate education." Adequate. The word hung in the air like smoke. Lawrence shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. His silence was becoming a pattern, and each passing moment without him speaking up felt like another small betrayal. "Your family must be proud," she continued, taking a delicate sip of wine. "What do your parents do?" "My mom's a nurse. My dad works construction." "How?" "Hard-working," she smiled, and somehow managed to make work ethic sound like a character flaw. "Blue-collar backgrounds build character, they say." I wanted to stand up and leave right then. Every fiber of my being screamed to walk away from this torture session masquerading as dinner. But I stayed because leaving would prove her right, that I didn't belong, that I wasn't good enough, that I was just some temporary distraction in Lawrence's carefully curated life. The main course arrived, and with it came more subtle jabs wrapped in compliments. "That's an interesting jacket, Parker. Very casual. Lawrence usually dines at establishments with dress codes. But I suppose love makes us flexible, doesn't it, darling?" Lawrence finally looked up at her, something flickering in his eyes. Was it annoyance? Embarrassment? I couldn't tell. "Mom," he started, but she smoothly redirected. "Oh, don't be modest, sweetheart. We've always had standards. Speaking of which," she leaned forward conspiratorially, though her voice carried clearly. "Lawrence, I had lunch with Vanessa and her parents last week. Such a lovely girl. Still single, can you imagine? Her father mentioned the merger proposal is still on the table. You two would make an absolutely stunning couple. Both from the right families, similar backgrounds, compatible futures." My heart stopped. This wasn't just dinner. This was an ambush. Lawrence's fork clattered against his plate. But he didn't contradict her. Didn't defend me. Didn't tell her that Vanessa meant nothing because he was with me. He just sat there frozen while his mother dismantled our relationship piece by piece. "Of course, we all go through experimental phases," she continued, her eyes finally meeting mine with unveiled disdain. "But eventually we settle down with people who fit into our lives properly, people who understand our world." I wasn't hungry anymore. My appetite had died somewhere between the appetizer and being compared to a phase. "The dessert menu is divine here," Lawrence's mother announced, signaling the waiter. "They have this chocolate soufflé that takes 20 minutes to prepare, but it's absolutely worth the wait. Shall we order?" "I need to use the restroom," I said abruptly, pushing back my chair. The screech of wood against marble echoed embarrassingly loud in the quiet restaurant. Of course, dear, she smiled sweetly. Take your time. I didn't look at Lawrence as I stood, didn't wait for him to say anything because I knew he wouldn't. I navigated through the maze of tables, feeling the weight of curious stares from other diners, until I finally reached the bathroom. Inside, I gripped the sink's edge so hard my knuckles turned white. The face staring back at me in the mirror looked wrecked. Eyes glassy with unshed tears, jaw tight with suppressed anger. I turned on the cold water and splashed my face, trying to wash away the humiliation. How had I let this happen? How had I convinced myself that someone like Lawrence could actually choose someone like me? I took several deep breaths, straightening my jacket and running damp hands through my hair. I wouldn't fall apart. Not here, not in front of people who already thought I was beneath them. When I finally emerged from the bathroom, I'd made my decision. I was done. Done with being hidden. Done with being treated like a shameful secret. Done with hoping Lawrence would suddenly grow a spine. But as I rounded the corner into the hallway leading back to the dining room, Lawrence was there, standing against the wall like he'd been waiting. "Parker," he started, his voice rough. "I'm leaving," I stated flatly, moving to walk past him. His hand shot out, fingers wrapping around my wrist, and suddenly I was being pulled toward him. My body collided with his chest and I could feel his heartbeat pounding as fast as mine. His other hand came up to cup my jaw, tilting my face up, and his eyes, God, his eyes were desperate and wild and conflicted all at once. "Don't go," he whispered, his breath warm against my lips. Before I could respond, before I could think or protest or push him away, Lawrence kissed me. His mouth crashed against mine with an urgency that bordered on desperate, like he was trying to prove something or apologize or claim me all at once. My brain short-circuited. Every rational thought evaporated as his lips moved against mine. One hand still gripping my wrist while the other cradled my face with surprising gentleness despite the intensity of the kiss. For a few stolen seconds nothing else existed. Not his mother sitting 50 feet away. Not the humiliation still burning in my chest. Not the fact that this didn't solve anything. Just him. Just us. Just this moment that felt like both a beginning and an ending. Lawrence kissed me like a man drowning. Like I was oxygen and he'd been underwater for far too long. His lips were urgent, almost aggressive, moving against mine with a desperation that felt more like panic than passion. For maybe 3 seconds, I let myself sink into it, let myself forget where we were, forget what had just happened, forget everything except the heat of his mouth and the way his fingers tightened on my wrist. Then reality crashed back in with the force of a freight train. I shoved him away, not violently, but firmly enough that he stumbled back a step, his eyes flying open in surprise. "What the hell was that?" I demanded, my voice shaking with anger and confusion and something else I didn't want to name. Lawrence ran both hands through his hair, making it stand up in disheveled spikes. "I couldn't let you walk away like that." "So your solution was to kiss me?" I stared at him incredulously. "Your mother is literally sitting right there, Lawrence. She just spent the last hour tearing me apart, and you sat there like a statue. You didn't defend me, you didn't correct her. You didn't do anything." "I know." "No, you don't know." I cut him off, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? Being compared to some woman I've never even met? Being told I'm just a phase? Having my entire life dismissed as inadequate?" Lawrence reached for me again, but I stepped back, creating distance between us. "Parker, please just let me explain." "Explain what?" My laugh came out bitter and hollow. "Explain why you couldn't find your voice when it mattered. Explain why I'm good enough for private moments but not public ones. Explain why you're still hiding me like I'm something to be ashamed of." The words hit him visibly. He flinched, his shoulders hunching slightly as if absorbing a physical blow. "It's not that simple," he said quietly, his eyes pleading for understanding I wasn't sure I could give anymore. "Yes, it is," I countered, surprising myself with how steady my voice had become. "Either you're with me, really with me, or you're not. Either you stand up for us, for me, or you don't. Kissing me in a hallway while your mother waits for you to come back and eat dessert doesn't change anything, Lawrence. It just makes it worse. Tell me what you want me to do," he said, and there was genuine anguish in his voice now. "Tell me how to fix this." "I can't tell you that. You have to figure it out yourself. I straightened my jacket, composing myself as best I could. I'm going home. You should go back to your mother and her perfect plans for your perfect future. This time when I moved to leave, he didn't try to stop me. He just stood there in that hallway, looking more lost than I'd ever seen him, while I walked toward the exit without looking back. The night air hit me like a slap when I stepped outside, cold and sharp and exactly what I needed. I pulled out my phone to order a ride, my hands trembling slightly as I typed in my address. The drive home passed in a blur. I stared out the window at the city lights streaking by, trying to process everything that had happened. Part of me wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. Maybe I was too angry. Maybe I was too hurt. Maybe I was just too exhausted from months of being someone's secret. When I finally got back to my apartment, a modest one-bedroom that suddenly felt emptier than usual, I collapsed onto the couch without even taking off my jacket. My phone immediately started buzzing with notifications. Lawrence, of course. Parker, I'm sorry. Please answer. We need to talk. I know I messed up. Don't shut me out. I turned the phone face down on the coffee table and stared at the ceiling. The worst part wasn't even the dinner or his mother's cruelty or his silence. The worst part was that some pathetic piece of my heart still hoped he'd prove me wrong, that he'd somehow find a way to make this right. My phone buzzed again, but I ignored it. And again, and again. Finally, I snatched it up, ready to turn it off completely, when I saw a new message that made me pause. I understand if you hate me right now. I probably deserve it. But please come to my office tomorrow morning. Let me show you something. Let me try to make this right. I can't lose you, Parker. I won't. I read it 3 times, each word embedding itself in my mind. Despite my better judgment, the smart thing would be to ignore it, to block his number, to move on with my life and find someone who wasn't ashamed to be seen with me. But since when had I ever been smart about Lawrence? I set the phone down without responding and headed to the bathroom, stripping off my clothes and stepping into the shower. The hot water did nothing to wash away the memory of his mother's condescending smile or the feeling of being systematically dismantled in front of him. That night, I barely slept. I tossed and turned, replaying the evening over and over, analyzing every moment, every word, every silence. By the time dawn crept through my curtains, I'd made a decision. I would go to his office, not because I was weak or desperate or hoping for some romantic gesture that would magically fix everything, but because I owed it to myself to hear what he had to say, to look him in the eye in the cold light of day and decide, once and for all, if this relationship was worth fighting for or if I needed to walk away for good. As I got dressed the next morning, choosing my clothes carefully, wanting to look put together and confident even if I felt anything but, I made myself a promise. No more accepting scraps. No more being hidden. No more settling for someone who couldn't be proud to have me. Lawrence would either step up completely, or I'd walk away completely. There was no middle ground anymore. Lawrence's office building was a monument to corporate success, all glass and steel and modern architecture that screamed money. I stood outside for a full minute, staring up at the building and questioning every decision that had led me to this moment. The morning sun reflected off the windows, making it look like the entire structure was made of mirrors, and I couldn't help but feel like I didn't belong anywhere near it. The lobby was worse. Marble everywhere, a fountain in the center that probably cost more than my annual salary, and people in expensive suits moving with purpose and confidence I'd never possess. I felt like an imposter in my dark jeans and button-down shirts, the nicest outfit I owned, but still painfully inadequate for this environment. The receptionist looked up as I approached, her perfectly made-up face shifting from professional politeness to barely concealed skepticism when she took in my appearance. "Can I help you?" she asked in a tone that suggested she doubted it. "I'm here to see Lawrence Hayes." Her eyebrows climbed toward her hairline. "Do you have an appointment?" He asked me to come. She studied me for a long moment, clearly trying to decide if I was telling the truth or if I was some delusional person off the street. Finally, she picked up her phone and spoke quietly into it, her eyes never leaving my face. After what felt like an eternity, she hung up and gave me a tight professional smile. "Top floor. Executive level. The elevator on the right." I nodded my thanks and headed toward the indicated elevator, feeling her judgmental gaze following me the entire way. The elevator ride was torture. Each floor that passed made my heart beat faster, made my palms sweat more, made me question why I was here. By the time the doors opened on the top floor, I felt like I might actually be sick. Lawrence was waiting just outside the elevator doors. He looked exhausted, tie loose, top button of his shirt undone, hair mussed like he'd been running his hands through it all night. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his usually perfect appearance was decidedly rumpled. For a moment we just stared at each other, neither speaking. "You came," he finally said, and the relief in his voice was palpable. "I shouldn't have," I replied honestly, stepping out of the elevator. He flinched at that but didn't argue. Instead, he gestured toward his office. "Please, just give me 10 minutes. That's all I'm asking." Against every instinct telling me to leave, I followed him down the hallway. His office was exactly what I expected, enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city, expensive furniture and artwork that probably cost more than my car. He closed the door behind us, and suddenly the space felt too intimate, too small despite its actual size. "Last night was unacceptable," Lawrence began without preamble, turning to face me fully. "My mother was cruel, and I should have stopped her. I should have defended you. I should have made it clear that you're not some phase or experiment. But you didn't," I stated flatly. "No, I didn't." He moved closer, his hands flexing at his sides like he wanted to reach for me but wasn't sure if he was allowed. "And I have no excuse that makes that okay." "Then why?" I asked, the question I'd been holding back finally breaking free. "Why can't you just stand up for me? For us? What are you so afraid of?" Lawrence was quiet for so long I thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Losing everything," he admitted. "The company, my family's respect, the life I've built. I know how that sounds selfish and cowardly, but it's the truth. At least you're honest about being a coward," I said, and the words came out harsher than I intended. He absorbed the insult without complaint. "I've been hiding who I am for so long that I don't know how to stop. My entire life has been about meeting expectations, maintaining appearances, being the perfect son and the perfect CEO, and then you came along and made me want things I never thought I could have." "What things?" "Honesty, authenticity, love without conditions." He finally closed the distance between us, stopping just short of touching me. "You make me want to be brave, Parker. You make me want to stop hiding. Wanting isn't enough," I said, even though my resolve was weakening with every word. "I need action. I need proof that I'm more than just someone you see in private." "I know." Lawrence pulled out his phone, and for a moment I was confused about what he was doing. Then he opened Instagram and showed me his screen. My breath caught. He'd posted a photo, one I didn't even remember him taking. It was from a few weeks ago at a park during sunset, his arm around my shoulders, both of us laughing at something. The caption was simple but public, undeniably clear. "The person who changed everything." "You posted this?" I asked, my voice barely working. 20 minutes ago." He watched my face carefully, gauging my reaction. "My publicist has already called 3 times. My mother's assistant sent 2 emails. The company's PR department is probably in full panic mode. But I don't care. I'm done hiding you. I'm done pretending you don't matter." I stared at the post, at the comments already flooding in, some supportive, some shocked, some cruel. This wasn't just a small gesture. This was Lawrence potentially destroying everything he'd worked for, everything he'd built, everything his family expected of him. "For me, Lawrence," I started, but I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to throw myself into his arms, grateful and relieved. But another part, the part that had been hurt too many times, remained cautious. "I'm not asking you to forgive me immediately," he said quickly, sensing my hesitation. "I know trust takes time to rebuild. But I need you to know I'm serious this time. No more hiding. No more being ashamed. No more prioritizing other people's opinions over your feelings." My phone buzzed in my pocket. Then again, and again, I pulled it out to find my own social media exploding with notifications. People tagging me, recognizing me from Lawrence's post, commenting, questioning, supporting, attacking. This was real. There was no taking it back now. "Your mother is going to lose her mind," I said. Probably. Your company might suffer. Possibly. You could lose everything. Lawrence reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away if I wanted to. When I didn't, he cupped my face in both hands, his touch gentle despite the intensity in his eyes. Then I'll lose everything, he said simply. But I won't lose you. Not again. Not ever. My apartment felt different when I returned that afternoon. The same furniture, the same walls, but somehow everything had shifted. Lawrence's public post had changed the landscape of our relationship, irrevocably, and I was still trying to process what that meant. I sat on my couch, phone in hand, watching the notifications continue to flood in. People I hadn't spoken to in years were suddenly reaching out, some supportive, some nosy, some just wanting to be part of the drama. Lawrence's post had already racked up thousands of comments, and his follower count was climbing by the minute. Apparently, a CEO coming out publicly was headline-worthy news. My phone rang, the screen displaying an unknown number. My finger hovered over the decline button, but something made me answer. Hello? Parker. The voice was unmistakable, crisp, authoritative, the same voice that had dissected me over dinner. This is Eleanor Hayes, Lawrence's mother. My stomach dropped to somewhere around my knees. Mrs. Hayes, we need to meet this afternoon. I'll text you the address. It wasn't a request, despite the polite phrasing. I don't think that's 3 o'clock. Don't be late. The line went dead before I could formulate a response. I stared at my phone, my heart hammering against my ribs. Part of me wanted to ignore the summons entirely, but curiosity and maybe a stubborn need to prove I wasn't afraid of her won out. Whatever she wanted to say, I'd face it head on. The address she texted led me to an exclusive private club in the city's most expensive district. The kind of place with no sign on the door, where membership probably required a 6-figure annual fee and 3 letters of recommendation from sitting senators. The doorman barely glanced at me before opening the door, as if he'd been expecting me. Inside, everything was hushed elegance. Thick carpets that swallowed sound, oil paintings in gilt frames, and the subtle scent of old money and older secrets. Mrs. Hayes sat in a private lounge area. Afternoon light filtering through gauze curtains and casting her in an almost ethereal glow. She looked like she belonged in a portrait herself. Every hair perfectly in place, posture impeccable even in casual repose. Sit, she said, gesturing to the chair across from her. I sat, keeping my spine straight and my expression neutral. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me intimidated. I'll be direct, she began, setting down her teacup with a delicate clink. You surprised me. How so? Most people in your position would have taken the hint at dinner, would have understood they were outmatched and gracefully removed themselves from the situation. She studied me like I was a curious specimen under glass. But you did, and now my son has potentially jeopardized his career for you. I didn't ask him to do that. No, but you didn't stop him either. She leaned back slightly, her gaze never wavering. Tell me something, Parker. What exactly do you want from my son? The question caught me off guard. What do I want? Money? Status? Access to his lifestyle? She ticked off each option on her perfectly manicured fingers. Everyone wants something. I want him to be happy, I said simply. That's all I've ever wanted. She laughed, a short, sharp sound devoid of humor. How charmingly naive. Happiness is a luxury, Parker. It's what people pursue when they have nothing left to lose. Maybe that's why so many wealthy people are miserable, I countered, surprising myself with my boldness. Because they're so busy protecting what they have that they forget to actually live. For the first time since I'd met her, Eleanor Hayes looked genuinely taken aback. Silence stretched between us, thick and weighted with unspoken challenges. You have fire, she finally said, and I couldn't tell if it was a compliment or an observation. I can see why Lawrence is drawn to you. He's always been attracted to things his world doesn't offer. Authenticity, passion, rebellion. I'm not a phase, I stated firmly, meeting her eyes, and I'm not going anywhere just because it's inconvenient for you. Even if staying costs him everything he's worked for, that's his choice to make, not mine and not yours. Mrs. Hayes was quiet for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she did something completely unexpected. She smiled. Not the cold, dismissive smile from dinner, but something that looked almost genuine. Perhaps I underestimated you, She stood, smoothing down her dress. Time will tell if you're truly what's best for my son, or simply what he wants right now. But I'll admit, you have more backbone than I gave you credit for. She walked past me toward the exit, pausing just before she left. Take care of him, Parker. Despite what you might think, I do love my son. I simply want to ensure he doesn't destroy himself in pursuit of something that won't last. Then she was gone, leaving me alone in the quiet lounge, my heart still racing from the confrontation. When I got home, Lawrence was waiting outside my apartment building, leaning against the wall with his hands shoved in his pockets. He looked up when he heard my footsteps, relief flooding his features. "Your mom called me," I said before he could speak. His expression shifted to concern. "What did she say? Are you okay?" "I'm fine." I unlocked my door and gestured for him to follow me inside. "She wanted to warn me off, I think. Or maybe test me. I'm not entirely sure." Lawrence closed the door behind us, his jaw tight with barely suppressed anger. "She had no right. Actually, she had every right," I interrupted, turning to face him. "She's your mother. She's worried about you. I get it. That doesn't excuse how she treated you." "No, it doesn't." I moved closer to him, close enough to see the exhaustion etched in the lines around his eyes. "But here's what I told her. This is our decision. Not hers, not the board's, not anyone else's, just ours." Something in Lawrence's expression crumbled then. He pulled me into his arms, holding me tight enough that I could feel his heartbeat against my chest, fast and unsteady. "I was so scared," he whispered into my hair. "Scared that she'd say something that would make you leave. Scared that I'd lose you before we even really had a chance." I pulled back just enough to look up at him. "I'm not going anywhere. But Lawrence, you need to understand something. I won't be your secret anymore. I won't be the person you hide when it's convenient and parade around when you're feeling brave. It's all or nothing now." "All," he said immediately, without hesitation. "I choose all. I choose you, Parker. Publicly, privately, permanently." He kissed me then, soft and sweet and full of promises I desperately wanted to believe. For the first time since that disastrous dinner, I felt hope unfurling in my chest like a flower turning toward the sun. Maybe we could actually make this work. Maybe love was enough after all. The next 3 weeks were a whirlwind. Lawrence's Instagram post had sparked a media frenzy that neither of us was prepared for. Entertainment news outlets picked up the story. Think pieces were written about CEOs and authenticity, and our relationship became fodder for public consumption. Lawrence handled it with surprising grace, issuing a brief but firm statement: "My personal life is my own. Parker is my partner, and that's the only comment I'll be making on the matter." But while the public scrutiny was manageable, the professional fallout was another story entirely. Lawrence's company was in crisis mode. Shareholders were nervous, board members were demanding emergency meetings, and rumors swirled about investors threatening to pull funding. I tried to give Lawrence space to handle it, focusing on my own work and trying not to obsessively check social media every 5 minutes. But I could see the toll it was taking on him. He looked exhausted, his usual confidence replaced by something that looked dangerously close to desperation. One evening I went to his penthouse apartment, a sprawling space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. I found him at his desk, laptop open, papers scattered everywhere, his tie discarded and his shirt wrinkled. "When's the last time you slept?" I asked, setting down the takeout I'd brought. He glanced up, seeming to notice me for the first time. "What day is it?" "That's not reassuring." Lawrence closed his laptop and scrubbed his hands over his face. "Come here." I moved around the desk and he pulled me down to sit on his lap, wrapping his arms around my waist and resting his forehead against my shoulder. We sat like that for a long moment, just breathing together. "Talk to me," I said softly. "What's going on?" "Everything's falling apart." His voice was muffled against my shirt. "The board is threatening a vote of no confidence. 3 major investors have already pulled out. My mother hasn't spoken to me in 2 weeks." My heart clenched. "Lawrence, wait." He pulled back to look at me, his eyes intense despite the exhaustion. "There's something I need to tell you. Something I've never told anyone." I waited, giving him space to gather his thoughts. "When I was 8 years old, my father abandoned us." The words came out quietly, each one carefully measured. His business had failed spectacularly. bad investments, worse decisions. We lost almost everything. And instead of facing it, instead of trying to fix it, he just left. Walked out one morning and never came back. I stayed silent, sensing there was more. My mother was devastated, but she refused to show it. She rebuilt everything from scratch, took over what remained of the company, worked 18-hour days, clawed her way back to respectability. And she taught me that emotions were dangerous, that vulnerability was weakness, that the only thing that mattered was success, because success meant security, and security meant never being abandoned again. His hands tightened on my waist. I've spent my entire life trying to be the opposite of my father. Reliable, stable, in control, never letting emotions dictate my decisions, never risking anything that might jeopardize what we'd built. But then I met you, he continued, his voice breaking slightly. And suddenly all those rules I'd lived by felt suffocating. You made me want things I'd convinced myself were impossible. Genuine connection, real intimacy, a life that wasn't just about achievement. Tears were streaming down my face now, but I didn't wipe them away. Lawrence, you taught me that being vulnerable isn't weakness, that love isn't a distraction, that maybe, just maybe, there's more to life than just surviving. He cupped my face in his hands, his veins brushing away my tears. Whatever happens with the company, whatever the board decides, whatever my mother thinks, you're worth it. You're worth everything. I kissed him then, pouring all my emotions into it. Gratitude, love, fear, hope. When we finally broke apart, we were both crying. We'll figure it out, I whispered. Together. He nodded, pulling me close again, and we stayed like that until the city lights began to twinkle below us. But the reprieve was short-lived. The next morning, Lawrence received an emergency call summoning him to an immediate board meeting. He left looking grim, promising to call me as soon as it was over. Hours passed with no word. I tried to work, tried to distract myself, but anxiety gnawed at my stomach until I felt physically sick. Finally, at nearly 7 in the evening, my apartment buzzer rang. I rushed to let Lawrence up, my heart pounding. The man who walked through my door looked nothing like the confident CEO I'd first met. His face was ashen, his eyes hollow, and he moved like he was carrying an impossible weight. What happened? I asked, dread pooling in my gut. Lawrence sank onto my couch, staring at nothing. The board gave me an ultimatum. Either end things with you, or they'll force me out as CEO. They've lined up shareholders willing to vote me out. One of our biggest investors explicitly stated that he won't continue funding a company led by someone making controversial personal choices. The words hit like physical blows. They can't do that. They can, and they will. He looked up at me, his expression a mixture of devastation and determination. So I'm resigning. What? No. I moved to him, grabbing his hands. Lawrence, you can't throw away everything you've worked for. I'm not throwing it away. His voice was firm despite the pain in his eyes. I'm choosing what actually matters. The company, the title, the money. None of it means anything if I lose you in the process. But this is your life. No, he interrupted, standing and pulling me close. You're my life, Parker. The company is just a job. A title is just a word. But you're real. You're the first thing that's ever made me feel truly alive. I won't give that up. I won't give you up. I was crying again, torn between heartbreak and overwhelming love for this man who was willing to sacrifice everything for me. Are you absolutely sure? I asked, searching his face. Because once you do this, there's no going back. Lawrence smiled then, a genuine, peaceful smile that I'd never seen before. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Lawrence submitted his resignation the next day. Within hours, the news broke publicly and the media erupted. Headlines screamed from every news outlet. Billionaire CEO resigns for love. Lawrence Hayes chooses heart over fortune. The most romantic resignation letter ever written. The public reaction was split down the middle. Half the internet called him inspirational, a hero choosing authenticity over corporate greed. The other half called him foolish, weak, and irresponsible to shareholders. But Lawrence ignored all of it, focused instead on building something new. The next 2 months were the most challenging of my life. Lawrence started his own consulting firm, small, independent, without the safety net of his family's empire. We moved out of his penthouse into a modest 2-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood that actually had character instead of just price tags. We learned to cook together because eating out every night wasn't financially feasible anymore. We figured out public transportation. We lived like normal people, and it was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. I threw myself into my freelance work, taking on more clients than was probably healthy, driven by both financial necessity and a need to prove I could contribute equally. Some nights we were both so exhausted we'd fall asleep on the couch mid-conversation, laptops still open, coffee cups forgotten on the table. But we were happy. Genuinely, deeply happy in a way I'd never experienced before. One evening, about 3 months after Lawrence's resignation, we found ourselves on the rooftop of our apartment building. It had become our retreat, the place to escape and breathe and remember why we were doing all of this. The city sprawled out before us, a carpet of lights stretching to the horizon. Lawrence stood behind me, arms wrapped around my waist, chin resting on my shoulder. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked quietly, the question that had been haunting me for weeks finally escaping. "Giving up everything for this for me?" Lawrence was quiet for a moment and my heart clenched, terrified of his answer. "Not even for a second," he finally said, his voice soft but absolutely certain. "Parker, before you, I was successful. I was rich. I had power and influence and everything society told me I should want. But I was empty. I was playing a role, living a life that felt like it belonged to someone else." He turned me around to face him, his hands gentle on my shoulders. "You didn't just change my life, you gave me one. A real one. I wake up now and actually look forward to the day. I laugh more. I feel more. I'm more myself than I've ever been." Tears blurred my vision. Even with the struggling, the uncertainty, the smaller apartment and the budget meals and especially with all of that, he interrupted, smiling. "Because it's real. It's ours. We built this together, and that means more than any inheritance or corporate title ever could." I kissed him then, there on the rooftop under the stars, tasting salt from my own tears and feeling more grateful than I had words to express. "I love you," I whispered against his lips. "So much it scares me sometimes." "I love you more," he replied, pulling me closer. "And that doesn't scare me at all. Not anymore." Time passed. Lawrence's consulting firm began to gain traction, attracting clients who appreciated his expertise without caring about his personal life. My design portfolio caught the attention of several major brands, and my freelance business grew beyond anything I'd imagined. We were making it work, not just surviving but actually thriving. Then 6 months after Lawrence's resignation, my phone rang with an unexpected call. "Parker, this is Eleanor Hayes." I nearly dropped the phone. Lawrence and his mother hadn't spoken since his resignation, their relationship fractured by his choice to walk away from the family business. "Mrs. Hayes," I managed, my voice carefully neutral, "I'd like to meet with you and Lawrence. Both of you. Dinner at my home this Friday evening." My mind raced. "I'm not sure that's—" "Please." The word was soft, almost vulnerable, so unlike the formidable woman I'd met before. "I owe you both an apology. A proper one." I looked at Lawrence, who'd been watching me with concern. I covered the phone's microphone. "It's your mother. She wants to have dinner. Both of us." His eyes widened in surprise, then something like hope flickered across his face. He nodded slowly. "We'll be there," I told Eleanor. Friday arrived faster than I was ready for. We stood outside Eleanor's home, not the intimidating mansion I'd imagined, but a beautiful brownstone in an old neighborhood, with ivy climbing the walls and warm light glowing from the windows. Eleanor opened the door herself, no butler or staff in sight. She looked different too, softer somehow, her usual armor of perfection slightly relaxed. "Thank you for coming," she said, and I realized with shock that she was nervous. "Please come in." The dinner was nothing like that first disastrous meeting. Eleanor had cooked herself, not elaborate restaurant fare, but simple, homey food that filled the kitchen with warmth. We ate at a regular dining table, not some formal setup, and the conversation was halting at first but gradually more natural. Finally, over coffee, Eleanor set down her cup and looked at both of us directly. "I owe you both an apology," she began, her voice steady but emotional. "I was wrong. About everything. I let my own fears and prejudices blind me to what was actually important. She looked at Lawrence. I spent so many years teaching you that security mattered more than happiness, that success was measured in dollars and social standing. But watching you these past months, seeing you actually live instead of just survive, I realized I robbed you of something precious. I tried to protect you by making you just like me. But all I did was make you miserable. Then she turned to me. And Parker, I underestimated you from the beginning. I saw someone who didn't fit my narrow definition of acceptable, and I tried to drive you away. But you've given my son something I never could, the courage to be himself, the freedom to choose his own path, real, genuine happiness. Tears were streaming down her face now, and I felt my own eyes burning. I don't expect forgiveness immediately, or maybe ever, but I needed you both to know I was wrong. And if you'll allow me, I'd like to try to be part of your lives. Not as someone dictating terms or demanding changes, but as family. Lawrence reached across the table and took his mother's hand. Mom, I'm proud of you, she continued, squeezing his hand. More proud than I've ever been. You chose love over fear. That takes more courage than anything I ever did. The three of us sat there crying and laughing and beginning the long process of healing. It wasn't perfect and it wouldn't be easy, but it was a start. Now, almost a year after that first terrible dinner, my life looked nothing like I'd imagined and everything like I'd hoped. Lawrence and I lived in our cozy apartment with mismatched furniture and inside jokes, and a future we were building together. His business was flourishing, my career was soaring, and Eleanor had become an unexpected ally, showing up for Sunday dinners and slowly, carefully, becoming part of our chosen family. That humiliating dinner had led to a desperate kiss in a hallway, which had led to this, a life built on honesty and courage and love. Not the fairy tale version of love that conquers all instantly and easily, but the real kind, the kind that requires sacrifice and compromise and choosing each other every single day. We won. Not against his mother or the board or society's expectations. We won because we chose each other, and we kept choosing each other, and that made all the difference.